Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today let's make a split spiral. I have the shirt prepped like normal. I have it turned inside out, and this shirt is a woman's Bella Canvas t-shirt that's a V-neck. I'm going to use a pair of locking tweezers and a microwavable splatter guard to start my spiral. I'm going to find a place on the shirt where I'd like to start the spiral, attach my locking tweezers, and then place the splatter guard over the top. The splatter guard is going to help to keep all of the tops of the folds relatively even. I also have the shirt with the front part of the shirt facing the table and the back side of the shirt facing me. Generally, whenever I do spirals, whatever part of the shirt is facing the table is the part that is tidier. The folds look nicer, and I'd like for that to be the front of the shirt, so I'm starting the spiral on the back of the shirt. Once I have the shirt spiraled, I'm going to go ahead and hold the folds in place with some rubber bands. So for this shirt, I'm going to kind of do a couple things at the same time. Number one, I'm going to make a split spiral, and then number two, I'm going to show you how to keep the white areas white on your shirt. I'm going to liquid dye this shirt, and I've mixed up Midnight Blue and Fire Red from Dharma Trading Company. I mixed up 1 cup of each of the colors, which was way too much for this shirt. So I probably could have gotten by with maybe mixing up 1/4 cup of each of the colors. Like I said, this is a Bella Canvas lady style shirt, so it's pretty soft and it's not super thick, and it's a size large. I'm telling you this so that you can maybe kind of gauge how much dye you're going to mix up if you're going to do a design similar to this one. Using a washable marker, I've divided my shirt into 4 sections. In 2 of the sections that are across from each other, I'm going to divide those sections into 2 areas horizontally. I'm going to apply the Fire Red to one of the sections that basically runs into the center of the spiral. Then I'm going to apply plain, clear water to the 2 sections on either side of it, the ones that I did not divide. The purpose for doing this is to try to keep these areas white. I know that some of this red is going to go ahead and creep over into this area, but if I add the water, it's going to dampen this area and slow down the movement of that dye over into this white space. In general, dye likes to go where it's dry. It kind of wicks over into that dry part of the fabric. And right now the shirt is damp, but as it starts to dry, I don't want the dye to wick over into the area that I'd like to remain white. If I wanted a larger white space, I would add less of the dye and add more of the water. So I would make my dye areas less than 1/4 of the shirt and go ahead and make my white areas a little bit bigger to accommodate and anticipate that dye going ahead and moving over into part of that space. In the other part of the section where I place the Fire Red, I'm going to place the Midnight Blue. In the section directly across from that, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to place the Midnight Blue closer to the center of the spiral and the Fire Red on the outer portion. My squirt bottle nozzles keep getting plugged with some of the dye, so that's what you see me doing when I put the lid back on it and shake it, is trying to make the dye flow a little bit better. Once I have the dye applied to this side of the shirt, I'm going to flip it over and do the same exact thing to the other side. I need to watch though whenever I grab the shirt to turn it over and not touch the white areas with my gloves. I'm using black gloves, so I can't really tell if I have any dye on there. I'm also using a paper towel to wipe off my rack before I lay the shirt back down. I'm going to use my washable marker and make myself some lines on this side too so that I know where to apply the dye. I can kind of see where the dye is coming through to separate the red and the blue in each section, so I don't really need to draw those lines. I'm going to repeat the same design on this side of the shirt and add the water to the white sections as well. Then I'm going to place this shirt aside and allow it to process. Because it's liquid dye and I don't have to wait for the ice to melt, I can go ahead and start timing my processing time right now. I'm going to leave it for about 24 to 36 hours before I start rinsing it out. For part of that time, I laid a container lid on top of the shirt and placed the shirt outside so that it could process in the heat. This blue really keeps plugging up the nozzle, and I mixed my dye really well, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on with it. Normally I would go ahead and put these dyes into needle tip bottles. That would give me a little bit more control over where I put the dye. If you notice, in the midst of kind of shaking my dye, I did end up with one spot of red dye in my white area. Okay, so now it's time to start the rinsing process. This is what the shirt looks like. And as you can see, some of the dye has gone ahead and moved over into that white area. But I was expecting that. I'm going to start by rinsing the shirt in cold water. And I'm holding the shirt directly underneath the water. I don't want to lay it down in my sink and any of this runoff water to run through the white area. So the first areas that I'm rinsing under the cold water are the two white spaces that I have on either side of the dyed areas. Once I rinse the two white areas really well in cold water, both the front and the back, then I'm going to start rinsing the dyed areas in cold water. When I rinse in cold water, I'm rinsing to rinse out the soda ash. I use a fiber reactive dye, and the fiber reactive dye needs soda ash to raise the pH, and it needs heat to bond the dye onto the fabric. So if I go ahead and I rinse out the soda ash, that's going to lower the pH, and that's going to make the likelihood of any of the dye that might still be active in the shirt from rebonding onto the shirt someplace else. Once I have all this soda ash out of the shirt, or as much of the soda ash as I can get out of the shirt, then I feel a little bit more comfortable laying the shirt down inside of my utility sink. I mean, you can see the dye running out of it. And in the initial part of this rinse, I didn't want that white part of the shirt sitting down in all this runoff. Now I'm going to untie the shirt and give it just a little bit more rinse time in the cold water to make sure any of the little areas that were tied up, get the soda ash rinsed out of those areas. Then I'm going to go ahead and warm the water up to hot and continue rinsing in hot water to try to rinse out the excess dye that didn't bond with the fabric. Every time you go ahead and dye a shirt, whether it's with liquid dye or ice dyeing, whatever method you use, there's going to be a little bit of excess dye that isn't capable of bonding with the shirt. I mean, you can just force so much dye into the shirt. So the hot water is really good to get that excess dye that didn't bond out of the shirt. So in general, the purpose for the cold water is to get the soda ash out of the shirt, and the purpose for the hot water is to get the excess dye out of the shirt. I don't like to just rinse for a long time in hot water. I mean, it could take quite a while to keep rinsing until my water's running almost clear. So instead, I go ahead and do a soak. And to do that, I add some really hot water to my utility sink, and then you saw me put a squirt of Blue Dawn dish detergent into the water. Blue Dawn is pH neutral. So what it's going to do is it's going to help to bring that water to a neutral pH, where if there happens to be any little bit of soda ash remaining in that shirt, it's going to help neutralize that so that the dye that's soaked out of the shirt doesn't bond back onto the shirt somewhere. You can see my water's got quite a bit of color to it. And that's just the dye soaking out of the shirt, but it's not going to rebond back onto the shirt. When my water cooled off, I changed it out and I continued that process until the water was remaining almost clear before I put it into my washing machine. I washed the shirt in my washing machine on a hot water cycle, along with a little bit of Dharma's professional textile detergent. The professional textile detergent will operate the same way as the Blue Dawn by keeping the dye that soaked out from redepositing on the shirt. Okay, so here's what the shirt looks like. I put a light blue background behind it because it makes it a little bit easier to see the white area. As you can see, the white area did stay white, and I like the split spiral too. I think that looks pretty cool, where it starts off either red or blue in the middle and then changes to the other color partway through the spiral. I think that's kind of a cool effect. And even though the red and the blue did creep over into the white area a little bit, I still ended up with a pretty good amount of white left on the shirt. I left about half of the shirt white, and I don't have quite half of the shirt left, but pretty close. Also, I've included a close-up of the shirt so that you can see my one little spot of red thankfully ended up on the back of the shirt, up toward the neck of the shirt. So hopefully whichever lady would like to wear this shirt has got long hair and it kind of covers that spot up. It's not super noticeable though. I mean, your eye doesn't immediately go to that spot. However, I really wish it wasn't there. I also like the middle of the spiral. I think it's nice and defined. You can see all three colors swirling into the middle. And when I say colors, I mean the red, the blue, and the white. So overall, I really like the shirt. I think it turned out looking really cool. But what do you guys think? Please drop me some comments down below and let me know. And if you've enjoyed this video and learning a little bit more of the science behind how to keep the white areas white and how to rinse a shirt where the dye doesn't stain the rest of the shirt, I sure would appreciate it if you would put a like on the video and if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.